This is part 2 in the series where I'm teaching you how to go about trading options in the stock market. Now in part 1, you learn the basics, but in part 2 today, I'm going to be showing you how to actually go about executing an options trade. So how are we going to go about buying these option contracts on any given stock in the stock market?
So I'm going to go into the option chain, and we've got right here our expiration dates. This might look kind of overwhelming. I just want you to focus on a couple of things. In the middle, right here, we've got our expiration date. These are the January 22nd calls. As you can see, I picked right here. And then on the right, we've got our strike price. For example, $220, $222.5, $225. On the left side, these are calls. And then on the right side, these are puts. So the market's closed, so these numbers aren't going to be changing at all. It makes it kind of easier actually to talk about it if the prices aren't constantly changing. Last is the last price someone paid for the contract. The bid and the ask, these are the price of the options contract. And then we've got on the other side the same thing, but again, this is for puts. All right, so how do we actually know what the value of these options contracts are? If we look under the ask and the bid, we can see that there's some prices. This contract isn't $26, it's $2,620. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. That's just how options work. So the options contract value has nothing to do with the actual price of the stock. This option costs $705. All right, and then we've got the in the money and out of the money for calls, and then for puts, in the money, out of the money. For example, say I think Microsoft is going to go up to $230. Now you're probably thinking, oh, I'll just go buy the $230 call, which would be $3 or $300. But what I always do, and I know I mentioned it briefly, is buy in the money. Now options trading is one of the most risky things I think you can do when it comes to trading in the market. It's very risky, again, due to the leverage you get, and your contracts can lose value very quickly if you're not careful. When I started options trading, I would buy out of the money, far out of the money, because they were cheaper, and I was trading with a smaller account, and I would buy a very close expiration date. Again, it was cheaper, and I didn't know what I was doing. I found out that was a really bad idea. I was actually on my way to work, and I was looking down at my phone, and this is when I had just gotten into options. I looked down at my phone, and instead of seeing, positive whatever, it was like negative, I think 90% on my new options contract I had just purchased the day before. So that was a bit of a shock to me to see how fast you could go and lose all of that money. That was the kind of turning point where I'm like, well, I need to educate myself. I need to actually learn how these options work. I saw how fast you could lose 90% of your money in just a couple of minutes. So that got me really curious. Well, if I could lose 90% of that money I had put on that contract, could I also make 90% of that contract's value, within a couple minutes when the market opened? I still made the same mistake several times, and it really took me a couple months to understand how this worked. So I'm going to try to explain it as simple and as straightforward as possible. The value of an in the money contract is going to be exponentially more than the value of an out of the money contract. That is because you're betting on the price going up just that much more. So the value is not there at the moment, but it could potentially be there in the future. That's why buying an out of the money call, you're able to make a lot more money, but they're also cheaper. So it's riskier, but it's also more rewarding. I want to give you some tips from my experience and what I've learned. Now, what I learned was if I'm going to put so much risk up front when I buy these contracts because it's options, I'm leveraging my money so much more than just buying a normal share. I have to do everything in my power to minimize that risk and minimize the chances of myself losing money in case things went the wrong way, like they did that first morning when I opened my phone and looked at my portfolio. And yes, it's going to cost a bit more to buy an in the money call with a further out expiration date. Two things: you buy an in the money call and you buy a further out expiration date. I'm going to get into why the expiration date is important, and that has to do with the Greeks, specifically theta. Now, don't worry about that. I'll talk about it in the next lesson. Just know that you want to choose an expiration date that's more than 2 weeks out. I personally always buy contracts at least a month out. And besides the Greeks, this will just give you enough time in case it does go the wrong direction and you lose a good majority of that contract's value, it'll give you that much more time for the stock to turn around and to gain the value of that contract back. So today is the 2nd, and say I think Microsoft is going to get up to $230. I'm either going to pick the 29th of January or the 5th of February for the expiration date. So Microsoft is currently at $222. This would be the $230 call. Currently, it costs $5.15. I'm going to be looking at something further in the money. I like to go 1 to 2 contracts in the money in case the price pulls back a little in the near term. I'm going to keep most of that value. So I'm going to go with the $215 call for $12.95. I'm going to click buy. Now we're going to get the opportunity to buy this actual contract. And right now it's automatically going to set it to a market order. Now, market order is going to fill you at pretty much the worst price possible. You're going to end up paying a lot more than you should. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to limit. Now, this is very important. Change it to limit order. I don't want to pay $12.95. I'm going to head down here. So I'm going to choose somewhere in the middle between $12.55 and $12.95. So by doing that, I'm going to get filled $20 lower on this contract. Now, if you were buying 5, well, that would have been $100 you would have just wasted if you had missed this little step. Now, it's not guaranteed that you're going to get filled at this price that you're asking to get filled at, and you could even try getting filled lower. I recommend going somewhere in the middle, finding a happy medium. And then once you've done that, all you have to do is hit confirm and send. That is how you buy an options contract. Very straightforward. Same thing applies if you're going to buy a put. It's going to be even easier if you're using Robinhood, and on every brokerage, you still will have the ability to place a limit order, and I highly recommend you do that. So everything I just went over, the same thing applies to the other side, which would be puts.
Now, after watching this video, if you guys would like to learn how to trade in the stock market, if options is the route you want to go because you see the potential in being able to take a very small amount of capital and leverage that, well, of course, properly managing risk to seeing exponential returns in the market, then click the first link in the description below. Now that is going to take you over to an application for my mentorship group, in which you're not only going to have the ability to see all of the option trades that I'm taking on a daily and weekly basis in the stock market, but you're going to have access to the entire system, which I've developed after trading for the last 7 years. You're going to learn how to find that consistent profitability in the market yourself through the means of trading stock options. Click the first link in the description below, again, if you would like to apply, and I'll see you in the 3rd part.